Welcome to this public forum with the candidates for the North Dakota Legislative District 47. I'm Ellie Shockley with the League of Women Voters, and I will be your moderator. This candidate forum has been organized by the League of Women Voters of Bismarck-Mandan and Dakota Media Access. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that promotes the informed participation of all citizens in their government. The League does not endorse or oppose candidates or political parties. There are 3 candidates running for election for 2 open seats on the House of Representatives of District 47, and all 3 candidates have joined us here tonight. They are Sabina Gasper, George Kaiser, and Larry Clemeen. The audience here tonight, Thursday, October 11th, is invited to submit questions on the index cards provided, and viewers and listeners may phone or text in questions for the candidates. The number to call is 701-355-1312 or text LWV18527 to the number 22333. This is intended to be a respectful exchange of ideas. Our purpose this evening is to provide voters with information about the candidates and their positions on issues that affect the people of North Dakota. Now let's meet our candidates. You each have 1 minute to tell us why you are seeking election to the District 47 House of Representatives. George Kaiser.
Well, thank you very much, Ellie, and I would like to take an opportunity to thank you and the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event. It's just a great thing that you're doing. The North Dakota Legislature, which I have been in for a period of time, has done an outstanding job of managing our financial condition as a state in good times and bad times. We've created an environment that ranks North Dakota number 1 or 2 in almost every leading business or living category that we can identify. And that's by outside sources. We've created job opportunities. We've diversified the economy. We've created a great school system and supported our communities in those efforts. For that reason, for all of those reasons, I strongly seek re-election because of the work that we've done and the additional work we need to do.
Sabina Gasper.
Thank you, Ellie. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this debate. I really appreciate the efforts you went through to get us all in the room together. It has been said that politics is the public expression and implementation of core values. If this is the case, then we need to reorient the state legislature to the core values of North Dakota. And these include individual and community strength, respect for each other, empathy, and truth, the very same values that drive me. As your representative, I will prioritize policies and programs that are expressions of these values. The budget we develop should reflect the values of the people of District 47, Bismarck, and North Dakota, because as legislators, we represent people, not institutions. I want to make sure people have enough to eat, have health care, that children go to great schools, and everyone, no matter where they are or who they are, have a secure, prosperous, and safe future. I firmly believe that a supermajority of either side is not healthy for a community, and my goal is to bring balance to the legislature. My commitment to you as your representative, thank you. I was told to stop.
Larry Clemeen.
Good evening. I'm Larry Clemeen, representative from District 47. I'm running for re-election to continue the work that I've been doing for District 47 and the people of North Dakota in the legislature. I've had a proven record of legislative accomplishments, and during my time in the legislature, I've sponsored over 300 bills. Many of those bills have been in the areas of public safety, criminal justice reform, things that affect all of us in our daily living. There is much more to do, and I want to continue to do that. I have a lot of ideas, and I expect that I'll have a number of new bills. I also serve in a number of leadership positions in the legislature. I'm chairman of several committees, including the Standing Committee on House Political Subdivisions. I think I have the experience and the leadership and ability to continue serving District 47.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the questions developed by members of the League of Women Voters, our in-house audience, and viewers at home. For our audience here to submit a question, please use the index cards provided. Viewers may submit questions tonight, Thursday, October 11th, by phone at 701-355-1312 or by texting LWV18527 to the number 22333. Candidates have not been given questions in advance, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Please comply with our time restrictions so we can get to as many questions as possible tonight. Our timer will let you know when you are down to 30 seconds, then 10 seconds, and stop. All right, so moving to a question. What is your position on unions, both private and public, and allowing public employees to collectively bargain, including public employees like police and firefighters? Sabina Gasper?
Thanks, Ellie. I support public unions, or I support unions in general. I support unions for private employees as well as public employees. I think it's through collective bargaining that workers are able to ensure that they get health care, their salaries are adequate for living, and that their pensions are fully funded. I also think collective bargaining is extraordinarily important in order to keep these rights for workers intact.
Larry Clemene?
Well, I support unions, but in private employment. I don't support unions in public employment. This is a right-to-work state, as many of you know, and there are also federal rules that have to be followed as far as unionizing through the National Labor Relations Board. Public employees occupy a different kind of role in the workforce than do private employees. If public employees go on strike, such as you mentioned, the law enforcement or police department, that would cause a great deal of civil problems in our communities. So we simply cannot allow that to happen. But on the other hand, we do have to respect the rights of those employees and do the best we can for them with respect to both their wages and their benefits.
George Kaiser?
Well, I have a position very close to Representative Clemene's. Certainly in the private sector, unions are a legitimate way to organize for employees, and the unions over the history of the United States have served a very important and good purpose. On the public sector side, as Representative Clemene suggested, it is different. But it's not so much that we should have or shouldn't have unions for the public employees, but we as legislators should ensure that public employees have every opportunity possible to provide input and participate in the process of determining their wages and benefits and other variables that affect them in their jobs.
Thank you. How should the legislature fund K-12 education? Larry Clemene?
What we've been doing in the legislature is we have passed legislation now that we are paying for, I think it is 80% of the cost of K through 12 education. We've passed in our last session a requirement that K through 12 education in school districts are to be held harmless. We have allowed the voters in a school district to increase the amount that they want to spend on themselves by voting on particular matters, like, for instance, this public school in the district in Bismarck has had bond issues that have increased the amount of property taxes, but those were overwhelmingly supported. So for the most part, the legislature is almost fully funding the K through 12 education, and anything beyond that is up to the people of the public school district.
George Kaiser?
I also support the position that 80% of the funding for public education, which the state is currently providing, is an appropriate level for the state to participate in public education. I think it's equally important that the local members of a community have participation and responsibility for funding education. They need skin in the game so that we get a system that they're engaged in. But again, a very important question is what's an appropriate level of funding for public education? The students, the children of our state are one of the top priorities of the legislature. We have to make sure that we are providing adequate levels of funding, and then once we've identified those, that the state participate at an 80-20 ratio.
Sabina Gasper?
The state does need to meet its commitments on funding education to the degree that it promised at 80%, with communities kicking in the last 20%. However, I think the argument that, or the position taken that education funding is held harmless is somewhat disingenuous, because as enrollment goes up, that money gets spread across more students with more needs and more programs required. What we're seeing now is overcrowding in the schools. We're seeing programs being cut, and we're seeing that both our struggling students and our excelling students are not getting the services that they need. It's also leading to higher property taxes to make up the gap if the state does not meet its obligation. We need to fulfill our obligation and fund the education levels to what we promised.
Thank you. What is your stand on the 6.5% oil extraction tax? Sabina Gasper.
The 6.5 oil extraction tax is something that needs to be continued. I think we've seen the legislature since about 2010 roll back corporate taxes, including oil and gas tax, which is leaving money on the table for the state. We need to tax our out-of-state corporations, and we need to tax our in-state corporations to the extent that they can provide a revenue stream that is stable for the state, that we can plan around, and that we can anticipate funding for. I think letting oil and gas companies escape the responsibility to funding the state and funding the workers in the state is irresponsible.
Larry Clemeen?
Well, I think the 6.5% oil extraction tax is certainly adequate. We also have an oil and gas gross production tax, and as you know, part of the funds from those taxes go into our legacy fund, which is approaching, I think, around the $5 billion mark. The last report I saw from the oil and gas division is that the amount of the taxes that are coming in from both of those taxes that I mentioned is approximately 84% higher than what was forecast in the last legislative session. That's due to the price of oil going up. I think it's in the last month it was $67, whereas that's much more than the amount that was forecast. So I think we're doing just fine with respect to the amount of taxes that are being collected from the oil and gas companies.
George Kaiser?
I support the 6.5% oil extraction tax. The legislature moved to that position after considerable study and thought, because whether the members of District 47 can fully appreciate it or not, oil extraction is a competitive business. There are many other states, Texas, California, and many other states that are also engaged in the production of oil. In order to entice companies to come and drill and participate in our oil basin, we have to remain competitive with other states. We have to provide them the incentive to come to North Dakota in lieu of going to Texas or any other state.
Thank you. Identify one area where you would like to see improvement from state government. Larry Clemeen?
I think the main area I'd like to see improvement is the things that we can do to assist in providing a strong workforce in the state of North Dakota. We currently have shortages in a number of occupations. Part of that's due to some of the restrictions that we've had on licensing those occupations. There are many areas where we don't allow for reciprocity or temporary employment from people in other states to come here. So an overview of all of these licensing occupations is currently underway through the governor's office, and I think that's something that we need to focus on.
George Kaiser?
The one area that I would like to see our state really work on is diversification for employment. We have a strong concentration right now in the oil basin. We have some other areas of concentration in our state. We have been relatively successful in providing good jobs that have attracted our young people to stay in our state. We need to continue that effort. We need to diversify our economy so when one of the areas of industry tend to have a downturn, we don't have so much of an impact on our state budget and on our workforce and our communities.
Sabina Gasper.
I'd like to focus on our workforce shortage. I think there's a lot of good work underway, both in the private sector and through public-private partnerships that we need to continue. There's a middle skills gap, if you will. That's the workers who have more than a high school diploma but less than a 4-year degree. And I see that as a place to expand skills to meet the needs of employers in our state. We also need to address barriers to employment that exist among Native Americans, new Americans, people with disabilities, and people who have been incarcerated. Healthcare and tech are two industries that have especially large and growing workforce gaps, and we can do a lot to address those. In addition to fully funding higher education institutions that offer 4-year degrees, we also need to invest in trade schools, technical education, and collaborate with unions to offer apprenticeships in the trades for workers who are interested in them.
Thank you. What do you believe is the proper use of the Legacy Fund? George Kaiser?
Well, that will be one of the most important issues coming up in the next legislative session. The Legacy Fund is a wonderful opportunity that was created for the citizens of North Dakota. And it was created not for just those people here today. It was created for our children and our grandchildren and their children. And so, on the one hand, we need to protect the Legacy Fund so that future generations can benefit from the wonderful surplus that has been created through the oil efforts in our state. On the other hand, we have to be reasonable and look at some of the earnings from the Legacy Fund. And when financial crises occur, we have to be able to use some parts of the Legacy Fund. That's one of the most important things the legislature will address. And I have confidence that given the leadership that we've shown in the past, we will manage that very well.
Sabina Gasper?
I'd like to look at using the Legacy Fund to balance the needs of the operating budget, both from an emergency perspective, but also from a operating budget perspective. I don't think we should be tapping the principal for operating budget. I think that that's something that we need to vote on, and I think it's something that needs to be brought to the legislature. I think we also need to take ideas from our constituents about what is the best use of the Legacy Fund and how we can operationalize that money to the benefit of all.
Larry Clemeen?
I agree with my colleagues to my right. The Legacy Fund is very important to the future of the people of North Dakota. That's why it was created. We all recognize that oil is a finite resource, and someday it is going to run out. And that's the point of the Legacy Fund, that we have a fund in place someday so that when that does run out, we'll have a source of funding for the programs that we want to continue. That applies basically to the principal in the Legacy Fund, which I think is over $5 billion now. With respect to the interest that's being earned, and I think the fund is being very well managed because the interest is coming in at a fairly good rate. That, as Representative Kaiser said, is one of the big questions that we're going to need to address in the next session of the legislature. What to do? Can we use money from the Legacy Fund for general fund purposes, or are there special reasons that we need to apply that to? We'll find out.
Thank you. Exactly where, how, and how often do you hope to engage with your District 47 constituents? Sabina Gasper?
As the campaign has unfolded, I've spent most of my time knocking doors. I think I've knocked north of about 3,000 doors. And I really enjoy the one-to-one contact and the conversations that happen on the doorstep. I recognize fully as an elected legislator, though, that that's not possible. I plan to hold town meetings. I plan to hold coffee times. I also have website, email, phone number, and plan to be readily accessible through those medium.
Larry Clemene?
Well, I welcome contact with the constituents in District 47. There's a lot of ways they can contact me. We have, through District 47, we have a website, we have a Facebook page. I personally have a Facebook page. I have a cell phone number, I have email addresses, and I'm also in the telephone book. Anybody can call me at any time and discuss anything. So I'm willing and able to meet with people if they want to meet with me at their office, at my home, or at the legislature. All they need to do is contact me. And we do provide opportunities for people to meet with us through the meetings that we have through District 47. And we encourage everyone to contact us and to meet with us whenever they have a concern or question.
George Kaiser?
As has been stated, we all have vehicles through which people can contact us. For me personally, I spend a great deal of my time outside of the session, at the end of the session, in the evenings, in the morning, before session begins, meeting with constituents concerning their issues and problems. There isn't enough time, obvious in the day, for us to meet with everyone. But speaking from my own personal experience, our legislators do an outstanding job meeting with their constituents whenever it's possible.
Thank you. How would you grade North Dakota state government in relation to ethics and information accessibility? Larry Clemene?
Well, I think we get a grade A in North Dakota. If you're specifically talking about Measure 1, I think it's something that's in search of a problem that doesn't exist. We have no ethics problem that I'm aware of in state government. If such a thing does come up, we have methodologies already available to take care of them. There are also criminal penalties for certain breaches of ethics, such as accepting bribes and that sort of thing. So there is, in my view, we don't have a problem in North Dakota with ethics.
George Kaiser?
I would like to just follow up a little bit on what Representative Clemene said. In North Dakota, no one has really demonstrated a significant problem that I'm aware of with ethical behavior on behalf of our elected officials. In contrast, in many other states that have some of the, or all of the elements found in Measure 1, we have a lot of people who have gone to prison and have had many problems. So one has to question, what is the problem in North Dakota? We have a great way of system of reporting income. We have a great system of reporting activities. What is the problem? The big problem with Measure 1, if that's the real question, is that it is going to be extremely difficult to implement and to regulate, and it's going to be expensive and basically impossible to deal with.
Sabina Gasper?
Well, this is one area that I differ with my colleagues on, is that I do believe we need an ethics commission, and I think we need oversight of both elected officials' activities with regard to financial fundraising, how they spend their money, where they spend their money. I also think that we need a place to go if there are questions raised about a person's conduct or behavior in government. I think just saying that we don't have an ethics commission, therefore we don't have a problem, is somewhat circular. I think other states have ethics commissions that deal with activities that are somewhat less than noble by their state representatives and their elected officials, and they don't seem to get in the way of actually good governing or good government.
Thank you. Again, we invite our in-house audience to submit questions using the index cards provided, and viewers may call 701-355-1312 or text LWV18527 to the number 22333 during our forum tonight, Thursday, October 11th. Do Do you support or oppose the repeal of North Dakota's blue laws? George Kaiser?
I support the repeal of the blue laws. We have so many situations where they have already been in effect repealed. It came very close to passing in the legislature last session. It does create a problem for some businesses, given the families today, where frequently both of the parents are working and they're working very different schedules. It is very difficult for families today to find time to go shopping together. And from what I've observed, there really isn't, given all of the things that are already happening in those periods of time which are not covered under the blue laws. I would certainly support a repeal of the blue law for North Dakota.
Sabina Gasper?
I also support the repeal of the blue laws for much the same reasons that Mr. Kaiser pointed out. I think families are stretched. People are working long hours. Add children's activities on top of that. There's not much time in order to get stuff done. And I think that the reality needs to catch up with what we have here, and we need to have the blue laws repealed.
Larry Clemeen?
I voted against the repeal of the blue laws in the last legislative session, and I think there is a time that should be set aside for families to rest and relax and enjoy family things, and not some of the reasons that my colleagues to my right have said about why we should get rid of the blue laws are the very reasons I think why we should keep them. Life is too hectic nowadays, and people just need a time of the day to sit back and reflect, go to church, do those things that families can do without worrying about the almighty dollar and going out and spending them in the stores. So I oppose the repeal of the blue laws.
Thank you. North Dakota is not receiving the same amount of federal transportation funding as in the past. How can the state make up the gap from the federal transportation funding? Sabina Gasper?
I think there's many ways we can make that gap up. If we have to fund it ourselves, we need to take a good hard look at the corporate tax rate that we have here in the state. And since 2013, I think, we've rolled that back so that out-of-state corporations and corporations are contributing about 2.4% of our overall revenue. If we're forced to make up federal dollars that aren't coming our way, we need to look inside and think about how we tax, who we tax, and where we can make up that revenue. If we think of ourselves as a business, which I've told that we should be thinking ourselves as a business, when you're short revenue, you go looking for more revenue. And it seems to me we need to go looking for more revenue internally and from the companies that work here in order to make up that gap.
Larry Clemeen?
If we need to make up any shortages in what we get from the federal government for transportation purposes, we're mainly talking about infrastructure in the areas of roads, highways, and bridges. And we are looking at that in the legislature, and I anticipate that there will be a bill that will be introduced in the next session relating to infrastructure spending. That bill is, I've heard, is being proposed in the amount of $280 million. 115 million of which would go to the cities, 115 million to the counties, and 15 million or 5 million to airports to deal with shortages in infrastructure spending for transportation purposes. So we are anticipating that will be introduced in this session and will go a long ways towards making up any of that federal deficit.
George Kaiser?
Well, one of the other solutions, which I hope North Dakota will eventually take a leadership in, does require national action. The federal gas tax, it no longer works. We have electric cars, we have hybrid cars. Cars are much more fuel efficient. So the ability for the federal government to fund properly their share of highway development is no longer available. We need a change in the way the federal government gets a collection of income for funding the infrastructure and helping the states as they have in the past. But given that we don't have that, we do have a bill that's been proposed that will provide a great deal of money to the counties, the cities, the oil basin, the airports. So we have addressed it at the legislative level, and we will come up with the monies that we can to help fund that.
Thank you. What can state employees expect with their salaries and benefits in the next biennium? Larry Clemene?
Well, I'm certainly hopeful that we can give the state employees a raise, and we weren't able to do that last time. We had to cut $1.7 billion from our previous spending due to the downturn in the price of oil and commodity prices. I've also always supported raises for our state employees. They're very important to the operation of the state. We also, I think we need to continue with the benefits that we have provided, both in terms of health insurance and other benefits, and particularly making sure that we adequately fund their pensions. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to give state employees a raise this time.
George Kaiser?
Currently, the proposal is a 2.2% increase over the next biennium. I certainly would support that. I personally would like to see it 3 and 3. But again, it comes back to how much money do we have in the budget, what can we afford. If we do good fiscal management, we have to address what we have available, what we can afford. I strongly support maintaining the benefits that our employees currently have relative to health, retirement, etc. In District 47, we have a great number of state employees. They're outstanding employees, and we want to recognize them. I know that both Representative Clemene and myself have been strong supporters of state employees and throughout our careers, and we would continue to be in that position.
Sabina Gasper?
I strongly support state workers as well. I think they're the backbone of the state. I think teachers, law enforcement, state workers are critical to our economy. And I would hope that we would find the money to support them to the extent that they need to be supported. We need to make sure that they have regular pay raises. We need to make sure that their health care contributions keep pace with inflation. And we need to make sure that their pension contributions are whole. I think we need to really think about our revenue stream and where we're getting the money. If we're depending on commodities and oil and gas, which are extremely volatile, we need to smooth that out and ensure that we have a steady stream of revenue in order to meet our obligations to our citizens.
Thank you. How do you feel the supermajority in the state legislature is affecting North Dakota government? George Kaiser?
Well, based on the performance of our legislature during the periods of supermajority, I think they've done an outstanding job. One of the beauties of North Dakota, which sometimes we don't stop and think about, is that every bill that's introduced gets a full hearing in committee. Every bill goes on the floor for a vote. That makes North Dakota absolutely unique. What it does do, in addition to that, is it gives the minority a very strong voice. Leadership can't block bills from going onto the floor for a vote. So if you want to know what our position is on any of the minorities' positions, you can go to our records and see how we voted. So I don't think the supermajority in North Dakota has had the negative impact it has had in other states.
Sabina Gasper?
Well, I firmly believe that a supermajority of either side is not healthy for a community. I think what happens is that the minority voice is drowned out by the supermajority. The ideas that get put forward are the ones of the supermajority, and there's very little pushback or ability to push back on those ideas. I think the reality is that neither side has a lock on the solutions that are right for the state, and I think it's through collaboration and compromise that we arrive at the best path forward for the state. I think we need to make sure that we have adequate and full representation from across the state and not just one group.
Larry Clemene?
Well, I think it's somewhat of a misnomer to think that just because there is a supermajority in the Republican Party in the legislature that we don't have disagreements. We certainly do have a lot of different viewpoints even within the majority party, and those disagreements and agreements are all something that we have to work out within the supermajority. Oftentimes, the minority party agrees with one faction or another within the majority party, and so it's not just because there's a supermajority doesn't mean that everything is all one-sided, because it isn't.
Thank you. Would you do anything differently in the implementation of recreational marijuana versus medical marijuana? Sabina Gasper?
I think if the state legislature had moved on the medicinal marijuana bill or ballot measure, we would not be in this situation now. I think I'm ambivalent about the recreational marijuana. I think medicinal marijuana is important. I have a family member who suffered from cancer, and the availability of marijuana would have been helpful for his treatment. I think we need to think very clearly about how we implement the recreational marijuana bill, and I think we need to take into consideration all viewpoints.
Larry Clemeen?
The initiated measure that created the legal ability to have medical marijuana was a very flawed measure. The legislature did act quickly on that in the last session to rewrite that with bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate, and it passed by more than two-thirds majority in each chamber. What problem has been is not with what the legislature did, but with the implementation of that after the legislative session ended. There are a lot of details that had to be worked out through the Department of Health and the Department of Human Services and other places. It's been a long process to develop the rules and figure out exactly where to go with it. So I think the main part of the reason why it's taking as long as it has is not due to the legislature.
George Kaiser?
Well, and I certainly agree with that. On the medical marijuana issue, on the one hand, we want North Dakota to do it right. We want to take whatever time is necessary to establish the rules and regulations, the way to manage it, so that at the end of the day, North Dakota has the best program of any state that has medical marijuana. I wish it would have, and I believe it should have gone much faster than it did. On the recreational marijuana, I strongly oppose the bill as written, or the referred measure as written. It's a poorly drafted measure. It will create significant problems for North Dakota and North Dakotans if it is passed in its current form. They make the argument that the legislature can fix it. It's not that simple. I hope that the people look closely at the wording in the legislation.
Thank you. How could North Dakota stay competitive in education given last session's cuts to the higher education budget? Larry Clemeen?
Well, it's interesting that you should pose the question that way, because I just read a journal report in the Wall Street Journal that shows across the country what has been happening in the financing of higher education. And of the 50 states, I think it was about 44 of the states had cuts that were somewhat cuts to significant cuts in the financing or in support of higher education in those cities. About 6 states had increases in the amounts that were being spent by the states on higher education. And believe it or not, North Dakota was the #1 leader in the increase in the amount of spending for higher education. So I think the question is posed incorrectly. We are funding higher education.
George Kaiser?
Higher education is evolving. You can simply watch the television and see all of the universities that are advertising on television. It's a changing world, and North Dakota has done, I think, a good job at addressing the evolving form that higher education is taking. I believe we're funding it adequately. We've asked them to make some very tough decisions, to restructure many of their departments, their divisions, because the economy required it. And they needed to become more adept and more active in delivering their product to our kids that are attending the institutions.
Sabina Gasper?
Well, I think there's a couple of things at work here. I think, first of all, education isn't a product that is delivered to children. I think it is a process whereby people attend school, they take classes, and they learn what they need to learn in order to make themselves employable and make their way in the world. I think we need to continue funding education, higher education, so that we remain competitive with our neighboring states, that we provide the very excellent foundation that we already are, so that people can find jobs, can be competitive in the workforce, and have the skills they need to be successful. I think it comes down to funding, and I think it comes down to making sure that we can maintain our commitments in those funding.
Thank you. What is North Dakota's biggest financial challenge, and how should it be addressed? George Kaiser?
Funding government is the biggest challenge we have, and that's all aspects of government. But probably within that, the infrastructure needs that our state has, the changes in the federal funding formulas that are affecting probably not only infrastructure, but public education, higher education. Just an example, with the passage of federal legislation several years ago, the funding for the residency programs that our medical school used for its graduates was cut 20%. The state of North Dakota was able to come back because we had the money and restore 17 residency programs which were lost due to cuts in federal funding. So as we go forward, the federal government is struggling to balance their budget. They're passing along a lot of adjustments in their funding to us.
Sabina Gasper?
I think the budget will be the focus of the next session, and I believe we have a revenue problem, not a spending problem. When revenue is down, we should go hunting for more sources of that revenue. And the response has been to cut rather than look for those sources of revenue. We also need to make sure that we are funding programs that educate our children, take care of our sick, and strengthen our infrastructure, because without that, we don't have a strong economy and we don't have a strong workforce. If we have a strong workforce and a healthy and vibrant economy, the institutions will follow, and those will remain healthy as well.
Larry Clemene?
Could you repeat the question?
What is North Dakota's biggest financial challenge, and how should it be addressed?
I think some of the biggest, there's a couple of areas there where we have financial challenges, and we've talked about some of that already. One is in the cost of repair and replacement of our streets, roads, highways, and bridges. Another is in the way that the federal government looks at federal Medicaid assistance. I think we're at the lowest point in our receipt of federal funds for that we've ever been. And so we have to make up the difference here in North Dakota and for Medicaid, and that includes a lot of different programs that all come under that Medicaid umbrella. And finally, I think the biggest economic challenge we have sometimes is just simply the cost of government. We've got probably more government for per capita than any other state in the union, and we need to look at more ways to economize.
Thank you. And thank you for being here tonight, candidates. You will now have 1 minute to provide a closing statement. Sabina Gasper?
I want to thank everybody for the excellent conversation. As I said at the outset, I am guided by our shared values and translating those into policies and programs that help all North Dakotans. I firmly believe that the state legislature must focus on people in order to have a strong, vibrant, educated, healthy workforce and economy. My promise is to reach across the aisle and work for the people of District 47, Bismarck, and North Dakota, and I would be honored to be your representative. Thank you.
Larry Clemene?
I also would like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum tonight. A little about myself. I'm a longtime resident of Bismarck. I'm a lifetime resident of North Dakota. I'm a husband, father, and grandfather. I'm a military veteran and served in combat with the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam. I have a bachelor's degree and a law degree from the University of North Dakota. I've been the founder of several successful businesses. I've been a lawyer in private practice in Bismarck. I've also given back to the community by my service with many charitable organizations. The 2019 legislative session is going to be very difficult. We need people in the legislature who know the issues and who can help the state of North Dakota to continue as the #1 place to live and work. I have the experience, background, and leadership needed to provide the best representation for the people of District 47 in the legislature. I ask for your vote in November. Send me back to the legislature to continue working for you.
George Kaiser.
Well, it's been a pleasure being with you tonight, and again, thank you. It's been an honor for me to serve the people of 47 in the state legislature. I've served as chairman of the House Industry, Business, and Labor Committee, served for many sessions on the Natural Resources Committee. I have been engaged in trying to achieve many of the things we've talked about tonight: the diversification of our economy, the creation of jobs, the development of the oil industry, and the general energy industry through natural resources. Concerns regarding water. We've dealt with those. We've done, I think, a great job managing the budgets for the people of North Dakota. We've made cuts when we've needed to, and we've spent money to create programs when we could. I want to thank you, and I would like to ask the citizens of District 47 for their vote.
I wish to thank Dakota Media Access and all volunteers from the League of Women Voters for organizing this forum. Thank you to the viewers at home and the audience members here tonight for taking time to learn more about the candidates and issues. This program will play several times on Government Access, Cable Channel 2 and 602 HD, and will be available for online viewing at www.freetv.org in the days leading up to the November 6th election. Before we close this candidate forum, we remind you that you will need a form of identification to vote in North Dakota. You can find identification requirements and additional voting information on the websites or at the offices of your county auditor and the North Dakota Secretary of State. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Ellie. Thanks.